Have you ever wondered if the knot in your stomach comes from something broken inside, or if it's actually a warning signal that the relationship itself is the problem? This question matters more than most people realize, because confusing personal anxiety with relationship-induced stress can keep someone stuck in painful patterns for years. This is the heart of the question. Are you secretly anxious or just dating the wrong attachment style? Understanding the difference could completely transform how relationships feel. Here's what makes this tricky. Anxiety in relationships often looks identical, whether it stems from an internal anxiety disorder or from being paired with someone whose emotional patterns constantly trigger uncertainty. Both create racing thoughts at night. Both generate that desperate need for reassurance. Both make it feel like walking on eggshells. But here's the fascinating part. One is about internal wiring, and the other is about incompatible relationship dynamics. And mixing them up leads to years of unnecessary suffering. The first clue lies in something called attachment styles. These are psychological patterns formed early in life that shape how people connect with others as adults. There are four main types: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Secure people generally feel comfortable with intimacy and independence. They trust others and don't panic when apart. Anxious people crave closeness but worry constantly about abandonment. Avoidant people value independence intensely and often pull away when things get too intimate. Disorganized people swing between wanting connection and fearing it. Now here's where things get interesting. Research shows that people with secure attachment experience significantly less anxiety in relationships. Their partners know where they stand. Communication flows. Conflicts get resolved without catastrophic meltdowns. But when an anxious person dates an avoidant person, which happens with startling frequency, something almost chemical occurs. The anxious partner starts seeking reassurance. The avoidant partner interprets this as pressure and withdraws. That withdrawal terrifies the anxious partner, who then pursues harder. The avoidant partner feels suffocated and distances further. Round and round it goes, creating what researchers call the anxious-avoidant trap. And here's the part that answers the original question. Studies reveal that even people who start out relatively secure can become increasingly anxious when repeatedly paired with avoidant partners. Think about that for a moment. The anxiety isn't necessarily coming from within, it's being generated by the dynamic itself. Imagine trying to build a house with someone who keeps moving the foundation. Eventually, even the calmest builder would feel shaky and uncertain. The relationship creates the anxiety, not the other way around. But because the anxious feelings are so intense and personal, many people assume something must be wrong with them. They blame themselves. They read self-help books about managing anxiety. They try meditation apps. And meanwhile, the actual source, the incompatible attachment dance, continues unchanged. Here's a distinction that clarifies everything. Someone with true generalized anxiety typically feels anxious across many contexts: work presentations, social gatherings, health concerns, financial decisions. But someone experiencing relationship-induced anxiety often feels perfectly fine when alone or with friends. The anxiety spikes specifically around the romantic partner or when thinking about the relationship. That's not a coincidence, that's a signal. The nervous system is reacting to real patterns of unpredictability, withdrawal, or emotional unavailability. And this brings up something evolution has quietly been telling humans for millennia. Evolutionary psychology suggests that anxiety in relationships originally served as a warning system. When early humans sensed a caregiver might abandon them, anxiety motivated them to stay close and seek reassurance. This kept vulnerable children near protective adults. Fast forward to adult relationships, and that same system activates when a partner's behavior signals potential abandonment, even if the abandonment is just emotional. An avoidant partner who goes silent for days, who deflects vulnerable conversations, who creates distance after intimacy, triggers that ancient alarm system. The anxious partner isn't imagining the threat. The nervous system is accurately detecting a pattern of inconsistency. What looks like being too needy might actually be a healthy response to genuinely confusing behavior. The tragedy is how many people gaslight themselves. They think, maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe other people wouldn't feel this way. But here's what the data reveals. When anxious individuals leave incompatible relationships and later pair with secure partners, their anxiety often drops dramatically. Suddenly, they're not constantly checking their phones. They're not analyzing every text for hidden meanings. They're not lying awake wondering if the relationship will survive the week. Same person, different dynamic, completely different anxiety level. This suggests the anxiety was situational, not fundamental, and that distinction changes everything. Online communities are filled with stories of people who had this exact revelation. Someone spends years thinking they're the anxious one, only to realize that in friendships, with family, even with previous partners, they felt stable and secure. The anxiety concentrated around one specific person or relationship type. That's the smoking gun. When anxiety is portable, showing up everywhere, it's likely an internal condition requiring professional support. When it's localized to romantic relationships with certain attachment styles, it's probably a compatibility issue. The solution isn't more therapy for anxiety disorders. The solution is recognizing incompatible dynamics and making different relationship choices. But here's where human psychology gets deliciously complicated. Many people feel most attracted to the very attachment style that triggers their anxiety. Anxious people often find avoidant people mysteriously compelling. Why? Because avoidant people create uncertainty, and uncertainty generates a dopamine rush that feels like intense chemistry. The hot and cold dynamic, the push-pull, the wondering, do they really like me? All of this activates reward centers in the brain. It feels like passion. It feels like this must be the one because the feelings are so intense. But intensity isn't the same as compatibility. Often, it's just the nervous system responding to unpredictability, which leads to a sobering realization. Sometimes what people call chemistry is actually just anxiety dressed up in romantic clothing. The butterflies, the obsessive thinking, the emotional highs and lows, these can indicate a wound being activated rather than genuine connection. Secure relationships often feel calmer, more stable, less dramatic, and to someone accustomed to the roller coaster, that calm can feel boring or wrong. The brain mistakes the absence of anxiety for the absence of love. This is why people sometimes leave perfectly good relationships with secure partners, chasing the intensity they felt with avoidant ones. They're essentially addicted to the anxiety itself, having confused it with passion. Breaking this pattern requires rewiring deeply held beliefs about what love should feel like. There's also the question of responsibility and emotional labor. In anxious avoidant pairings, the anxious partner typically does most of the emotional work. They're the ones initiating difficult conversations. They're tracking the relationship's temperature. They're trying to bridge the distance the avoidant partner creates. Over time, this imbalance generates resentment and exhaustion. The anxious partner starts to feel like they're the only one invested, which amplifies their anxiety further. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner feels criticized and pressured, which makes them withdraw more. Neither person is necessarily wrong, but the dynamic itself is toxic. And this is crucial to understand. Attachment styles aren't fixed personality traits. They're adaptive strategies formed in response to early experiences with caregivers. Someone who learned that expressing needs led to rejection might develop an avoidant style as protection. Someone who learned that caregivers were inconsistent might develop an anxious style to stay vigilant. These strategies made sense at the time. They helped young people survive emotionally challenging environments. But in adult relationships, they can create suffering. The good news? Attachment styles can shift. With self-awareness, therapy, and, importantly, the right relationship experiences, people can move toward more secure patterns. But that shift requires recognizing the pattern first. Here's a practical way to tell the difference between personal anxiety and relationship-induced anxiety. Pay attention to how feelings change in different contexts. Does anxiety spike primarily when thinking about or interacting with a romantic partner? Does it ease when alone or with friends? Do other areas of life feel manageable while the relationship feels chaotic? These patterns suggest the anxiety is situational. Conversely, if anxiety permeates work, friendships, health concerns, and daily decisions regardless of relationship status, it's more likely a generalized condition. Both types of anxiety are valid and deserve attention, but they require different approaches. One needs boundary setting and possibly a relationship change. The other needs therapeutic intervention for anxiety management. Confusing them leads to ineffective solutions. Another revealing sign is how past relationships felt. If every romantic relationship has generated similar anxiety patterns, regardless of the partner, that suggests an internal attachment wound requiring deeper work. But if some relationships felt secure and calm, while others felt chaotic and anxiety-producing, that points toward compatibility issues. Patterns across multiple partners reveal important information. They show which dynamics feel safe and which trigger old wounds. This isn't about blaming partners or avoiding responsibility. It's about gathering data to make informed choices about which relationship dynamics support well-being and which undermine it. Social media and online communities have brought attachment theory into mainstream awareness, which is mostly helpful. People now have language for dynamics that previously felt confusing and nameless. Someone can read about anxious avoidant traps and think, oh, that's exactly what's happening. That recognition alone can be powerfully validating. It shifts the narrative from something's wrong with me to we're in an incompatible dynamic. However, there's also a risk of over-identifying with attachment labels, using them as excuses rather than insights. The goal isn't to say, well, that's just how avoidant people are, and resign to dysfunction. The goal is to understand the pattern and then decide, does this dynamic serve me? Can it change? Or is it time to make a different choice? The research is clear on one point. Staying in incompatible attachment dynamics doesn't just maintain anxiety, it can worsen it over time. Each cycle of pursuit and withdrawal reinforces neural pathways. The anxious partner becomes more hypervigilant. The avoidant partner becomes more defensive. Both people's nervous systems get increasingly sensitized to perceived threats in the relationship. What might have started as moderate incompatibility can escalate into severe distress. This is why recognizing the pattern early matters. The longer someone stays in an anxiety-producing dynamic, the harder it becomes to distinguish their baseline from the relationship's effects, and the more difficult it becomes to trust that calm, secure relationships are even possible. So what does all this mean for someone trying to answer the original question? Start by getting curious rather than judgmental. Notice when anxiety appears and when it doesn't. Track patterns across relationships. Seek feedback from trusted friends who can offer outside perspective. Consider whether the relationship includes genuine safety, consistent communication, reliable follow-through, emotional availability, or whether it's characterized by confusion, mixed signals, and withdrawal. Sometimes the answer is that someone has both personal anxiety and incompatible relationship dynamics. Both can be true simultaneously. In that case, working on internal anxiety management while also choosing more compatible partners creates the best outcome. Here's what matters most. Anxiety in relationships isn't a character flaw, it's information. Sometimes it's information about internal patterns that need healing. Sometimes it's information about external dynamics that need changing. Often it's both. The key is learning to decode the signal accurately rather than defaulting to self-blame or staying in painful patterns out of fear or habit. People deserve relationships that feel safe, not relationships that constantly activate their threat response. And recognizing the difference between those two experiences is the first step toward building something better. Now, here's what to do with all of this. First, get honest about current relationship patterns. Does the relationship generally feel calm and secure, or does it feel unpredictable and anxiety-producing? Is there consistent emotional availability or frequent withdrawal? Can vulnerable conversations happen without catastrophic conflict or stonewalling? These questions reveal whether the relationship's foundation supports well-being. Second, explore personal attachment history. What were early relationships with caregivers like? How did those experiences shape beliefs about worthiness, trust, and connection? Understanding these roots helps separate past wounds from present reality. Third, consider whether anxiety appears primarily in romantic contexts or across life broadly. This distinction guides whether the focus should be on relationship choices or anxiety management more generally. Fourth, if currently in an incompatible dynamic, decide what's negotiable and what isn't. Can both people commit to understanding their attachment patterns and working toward more secure relating? Is there willingness to try couples therapy or individual therapy? Or has the pattern become so entrenched that the healthiest choice is to step away? This isn't about giving up easily, but about recognizing when a dynamic causes more harm than growth. Fifth, when considering new relationships, pay attention to how the nervous system responds. Does time with this person feel generally calming or generally activating? Do they communicate clearly or leave things ambiguous? Do they move toward vulnerability or away from it? Early patterns often predict long-term dynamics. Trust those signals. Sixth, work on developing earned security regardless of attachment history. This means building self-awareness, practicing emotional regulation, learning to communicate needs clearly, and choosing relationships with people who can meet those needs. Secure attachment isn't just something people are born with. It can be developed through intentional practice and healing work. Therapy, particularly modalities focused on attachment, can accelerate this process. Finally, remember that choosing differently requires grieving what won't work. Sometimes the hardest part isn't recognizing incompatibility. It's accepting that love alone doesn't fix attachment mismatches. Deep feelings can exist alongside deep incompatibility. Honoring both truths allows for difficult but necessary choices. The emotional truth beneath all of this is simple but profound. People aren't broken for feeling anxious in relationships. Often they're simply responding accurately to inconsistent or emotionally unavailable partners. The nervous system is doing its job, detecting threat and sounding the alarm. The question isn't, why am I so anxious? The question is, what is this anxiety trying to tell me? Sometimes it's saying, this person isn't safe. Sometimes it's saying, old wounds are activated and need healing. Sometimes it's saying both. Learning to listen to that wisdom, rather than pathologizing it, opens the door to healthier choices and relationships that actually feel good, not just intense, but genuinely nurturing and secure. This isn't about finding perfect people or perfect relationships. It's about finding compatible dynamics that support growth rather than undermine it. It's about recognizing that chemistry and compatibility aren't the same thing. It's about trusting that calm, secure love is possible, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. And it's about believing that everyone deserves a relationship where anxiety is the exception, not the constant baseline. That's not too much to ask. That's just what healthy relationships feel like. So pay attention to the patterns, trust the signals, and make choices that honor well-being, not just intensity. The right relationship won't eliminate all anxiety. Life is uncertain and some worry is normal. But the right relationship won't be the primary source of it either. And that difference matters more than words can express.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.